I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Welcome back, everybody. Hello, Weekly listeners. If you remember, I'd said that I wanted to invest more in my clothing in 2025, and the universe really listened because I connected with my guest today. I'm going to introduce right away is Ambika Singh, CEO of Armoire. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
I am so honored to be here and very honored to be a part of your 2025 plan.
That's right. So Armoire, for those that don't know, I guess you should explain it. For Armoire, for those that don't know, tell me a little bit about it.
So Armoire is hopefully, Rachel, your dream closet.
It is.
And what that means is that it is a giant selection of clothing that we share. And the way that we share that is that Armoire sends the clothes out to our new customers like you. You wear the clothes as long as you want. When you're done with them, you give us a little feedback about whether you like them or not. Did you like the fit? Did you like the style? We use that information to show you a new selection of clothing. So instead of kind of throwing the book at you of the hundreds of thousands of items that we own, we try to present to you a personalized set.
Yeah.
You pick new clothes, wear them as long as you want. And when you're done with them, you send them back to us.
I love it. So when we agreed to do this, you graciously allowed me to have a free month subscription because it's a monthly subscription membership. And I'm not kidding you. Every piece of clothing that I wore, I received more than one compliment, and oftentimes from a stranger. Because I was thinking, like, it's probably from my friends being like, whoa, you never buy new clothes. What's this jacket? But literally, like, a parking attendant was like, wow, I love your outfit. Like, I walked into a store today, and they're like, I love your jacket. And I'm a words of affirmation girly, so it has really been nice. The other thing is I went to a networking event, and it was with these, like, super powerful women. Like, not that I didn't feel like I belonged, but I was like, okay, like you can fit into this room. And I wore the jumpsuit I'm going to put on later, and multiple people gave me compliments. It just made me feel more confident. So I know I sound like I was paid to say this, but like it truly was a great experience for me. And I think that the struggle I have now is like, do I want to buy them and keep them, or do I want to return them and or like send them back and get other stuff? Is that often a problem with people?
So you do have the option to buy it, but what I will suggest is that over time you may cure yourself of that desire. To a nice way of saying it is own. A less nice way of saying it is hoard.
Yes.
When we share, we actually feel dopamine released, and it's a positive thing. You know this because when you share with people you love, food, wine, those things that we're used to sharing, it's better.
Yeah.
And the same thing will happen to you with hard goods as you learn to share them. Clothing first, but certainly our aspiration at Armoire is much broader than just clothing.
I love that. And for the listeners of how we kind of interacted and how this came to be, I heard about you when you were your company, Armoire, was an exhibitor at the Women Who Lead Summit. So that's an event I've talked about a few times on the podcast because some of the other guests have been speakers at that event, but you were an exhibitor there. And then over the years, I've just kept hearing your name. And then a couple past guests, Caitlin Brom and Marcel Van Camp, they use Armoire. And I just feel like we kept circling friend groups. And I'm like, let's talk. Let's get you on here. So I'm excited to have you. I do want to give a little background on you. You launched this company in 2016. Prior to that, you worked in consulting and you worked at startups like Rover, which I guess isn't totally a startup now. And before that, worked at Microsoft. You are currently on the board of United Way of King County. And worth noting, we'll talk a little more about this, but you received your bachelor's at Dartmouth with history, economics, and microfinance degree, and received your MBA at MIT. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. That's my whole life in 2 quick sentences.
I mentioned this already, but I always research my guests, and sometimes I like cross the line and I over-research, and now I feel like I know too much about you. But one thing that you said on a podcast was that you always wanted to achieve and be the best at everything, and you're like, I think that's the 80s way of saying I have anxiety. And I was like, oh, relatable, so relatable. But I want to talk about, I mean, this is sort of related, but you went to MIT, and that's sort of the start of this business. Is that right?
That's totally right. And that's such a good quote to bring back to me. I'm turning 40 this year, and I've been thinking a lot about what is best and what does it mean to win and what race exactly am I winning right now?
What is success?
And I think that is the 80s baby growing up and realizing that life is not a race, and it's very hard to figure out if you're actually winning or not.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm winning anymore. So I came to MIT hoping to find this clouds parting moment, this business would begin, and I would know that it was blessed and it was the thing. It didn't exactly happen like that. I got to MIT. It was amazing. It is a bastion of innovation, very different than the place I went to undergrad, which was like more of a fun-loving location. One of my favorite stories about MIT is when you walk across the campus on Saturday mornings, it's very quiet, and there are no walks of shame going on.
Oh, okay. People are actually going to school. Got it.
They're going to school, and there's a lot of innovation happening. It's very cool. But yeah, I spent my first year there, loving it and learning a lot of things, but no clouds had parted. And so I became a consultant over the summer and enjoyed it, but I knew it wasn't my thing. So I came back my second year, and I was looking for the next thing. And so I spent my second year trying all kinds of different ideas. And I had the good fortune of, I was the second employee at Rover. So I spent a lot of time standing in dog parks, kind of trying to make a two-sided marketplace come together. You need the dogs and you need the sitters, and you kind of got to balance it. So I'd seen some of that before I knew that I loved day one. I just didn't know what day one was going to be for me next. And so I tried ideas as far apart as elderly loneliness. If you have read a little bit about this, it's certainly an epidemic in America. It's actually not as of a fixture as people might imagine. It's a new problem. We didn't have old people that lived alone until very recently because they were an important part of our multifamily, multi-generational living experience. And this new modern era has given us a problem that we don't yet know how to solve. Thought about a business in that place. I thought about businesses like all the way over here. Another interesting fact is that most people's feet are different sizes. They're about half size off. But we operationally can't figure out how to sell you two different shoes. So we just ask your right foot to compensate for your left foot for your entire life.
Wow, that's so true.
This seemed like a colossal problem to me.
But so you didn't start that one?
There was something about this one that I stuck with. And one of the big reasons then and now continue to be that there was so much customer energy around the problem. And what I mean by that is I spent a bunch of time in people's houses, and I was really trying to, I knew like 3 lines worth about design thinking, and I was trying to like take that philosophy of really getting people to kind of like tell you things without asking them sort of pointed questions to see sort of intimately what their problems were and where their energy was. And especially with women, we would very often end up in front of the closet. That's where a lot of their time had been spent, a lot of their money. And paradoxically, it was also a place that was not making them happy. And the most frequently repeated word to me was the word guilty. People felt guilty about the money and the time that they had spent. They also felt guilty about the fact they didn't fit into their clothes anymore. They felt guilty that the things were out of style. Just long list of reasons why this incredibly expensive asset was actually breeding unhappiness.
Can I tell you that I feel guilty? I don't know if my mom's listening, but she buys me a lot of clothes. And sometimes it's a nice piece of clothing. I just don't wear it because it's just not my vibe anymore. And I can't throw it away because I'm like, that's the meanest thing I could do is throw away this piece of clothing that my mom got me. And that's ridiculous. I have these clothes that are just taken. Anyway, I relate to like looking at the closet being like, oh man, I can't get rid of this. I can't do that.
You exactly described the customer problem. And we do have this kind of deep emotional attachment to our goods. And it's because there's people behind them. Yeah. Yeah. Like you look at the shirt and you think of your mom. It's not the shirt. It's your mom. And so it's tricky to try to untangle this. And it's scary to think that that is actually the core problem that I'm trying to solve. And the reason for that is because our attachment for goods in the modern era is going to kill our planet.
We're seeing a lot of those like documentaries about fast fashion and Shein and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that the rental model is probably helping a lot with that. Because what'd you say? People get 15 uses out of it? Something like that?
So actually, I mean, we expect it to be much higher than that.
Oh, okay.
So right now, our inventory is fairly young because the company is so young, relatively. And so we see an average turn numbers of about 20 today. It probably, because you've done so much research. See,
That's probably a few years ago.
It's gotten better, yes. So we expect that number to get even higher. And to give you the contrasting number, the average item in the landfill in America has had 7 wears.
Oh, wow. Okay. Average item in the landfill is 7 wears. Okay.
30% of it has never been worn.
That's terrible. That is terrible. Okay, we're going to learn a lot more about this. I want to get into our articles. I will say for everybody listening that there wasn't like a big news week this week. And so if you're wondering what's happening in Seattle in the business world, 2 of the articles that we're not going to cover, one is that Starbucks is kind of trying to go back into this, like, do you want your coffee for here or to go? And we're going to do like the coffee art on the top of your cup. And they're just trying to make it more. And this new Chipotle CEO is coming in and he's trying to make some changes. So that's what you missed. And what we're going to talk about today is funding levels for women founders is at its lowest in 5 years. Awesome. That's so fun for us. The business of subscription boxes, a Seattle shipping company closes. And lastly, we're going to talk about return to office and how companies are rethinking their dress codes. So, Ambika, are you ready?
I am ready.
Did you feel like you were back at MIT studying up on all these articles?
I actually think this is such an incredible format for a podcast. It's really innovative. How did you come up with this?
Because I didn't want to read the newspaper and I wanted somebody to tell me what the top 5 articles were in like a very conversational way, which now the joke's on me because now I have to read the articles. But I was working at the Puget Sound Business Journal and I got to know what was going on in the news because of my coworkers and, I was doing the events there. So the honorees and the speakers, and I didn't have to read the paper, but now I do. But yeah, so I just wanted people to kind of know what was going on. And then
I love that. I think like on the guest side, I can wax on about myself for a long time, but this kind of like makes it fun. There's something new also for me to kind of engage in and try to think about.
Totally. Yeah. I think the other thing that I like, I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I like that you get context with your news. So for example, the increase in minimum wage and tipped workers like in the restaurant, at face value, you're like, great, that sounds great. We want to pay our people more. And then you have Elena Morris sit down, who's the president of Ascend Hospitality. And she's like, no, this is what it is behind the scenes. This is what it means for small business owners. And so you get to hear like, what do these news articles mean to somebody that we're going to talk about raising capital. Like, what does it mean to a woman to raise capital versus just seeing the headlines? So yeah, it's been fun, but I'm glad you studied up. We're going to get into our first one, which is, like I said, founding levels have dropped for women founders. I want to shout out, this is a Formidable article. If you remember Emily Parkhurst, she was my old boss. She started this company called Formidable. You can find it at beformidable.com. And this article she wrote was that it's quoting PitchBook, which is another Seattle company, that in the past 5 years, it's the smallest share of venture funds that women are receiving. So it has dropped about 2% down to 23%. I want to be clear. You'll see a couple different numbers when you Google this, but essentially it's if there is a woman who is a founder at the company, that's what we're talking about with the 23%. When you talk about, and you probably know this well, but if you're talking about companies that are only female founded, that gets down to about 2 to 3% of the funding. But we're talking, either way, we're just saying it's down. The article talks about, why is that? And some of them are saying, well, it's because if you don't have AI in your company, you're not getting funding. And most AI companies are led by men. The counter to that is somebody was saying like, well, it's not that simple. Most, there are AI founders that are women, but a lot of those are first time founders or early founders. And that's what's hard to get funding. Another reason is that there's a consolidation of VCs into a small group of very large firms that can make it hard for women to get funding. So let's talk about capital. How did you raise this money? I mean, we're sitting here with this huge warehouse. So to do something like this, you need to start with a lot of money to buy a lot of clothes. Am I right?
Or you don't know that you need a lot of money and a lot of clothes. And you think that this will just sort of work itself out.
Sure. As an entrepreneur thinks, right?
Right.
It'll work out. I have an idea. But yeah, how did you get the money for it? How did you raise the capital?
Yeah, so I didn't really know. And that has been a huge gift to me and continues to be along the way. I'm sure in 10 years when I look back, I'll be like, God bless, you didn't know what was coming.
But you need that. We were talking about that earlier, is like you need a little bit of ignorance and delusion to be like, I could do that. And like, if you knew everything you knew now, you probably wouldn't have started it, right?
100%.
So how did you raise capital for Armoire?
The way that I raised capital for Armoire was I was scrappy and continue to be. And so what I mean by that was that I didn't really know that I was raising money to stand behind this 30,000 square foot warehouse at the time. What I knew was that I needed a customer, and to get a customer, I needed to have clothes. And so the way that I started was that I had a very good friend in business school who asked me to borrow a dress. I had been thinking about Armoire, doing this design thinking that we talked about. I'd talked to so many women, but I had not taken a step. And for whatever reason, that was the moment. She asked me if she could borrow a dress for a wedding, and I squeaked out, could you rent it from me? And at this point, everyone knew that I was wanted to get started. And she was like, fine. I was like, but you have to pay me. Yeah. She was like, okay. I have the Venmo transaction framed. It was the first, and she came back from the wedding with 2 more customers for me. And quite literally, the way I dressed her was I took $100 and I bought 4 dresses on sale from the internet, shipped them to myself, packed them in a package, dropped them off at her house, and there we go. So the original money that I raised for this business was $100 came out of my own checking account. And that's like a kind of maybe like a silly story, but I actually think, and you and I talked about this, so many great ideas die in that space between the $100 investment that you took out of your own checkbook and certainly there's so much privilege in that, right? I had $100 to lose. And in fact, I had more money than that to lose. And I also had time to lose it. And so I do think that there is somewhat of an illusion, especially in America, of entrepreneurship being a way for people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I would love for that to be true. Actually, you need to have some amount of a backstop behind you. And I think that's a tough thing to swallow. Sometimes it doesn't gel with my image of America. I want my America to be a place where really meritocracy wins and we are able to give opportunities to people. But I do think it's worth saying out loud that this is a very risky game and you need to have somewhat of a backing.
Well, you want it to be like, I have this great idea. I have the passion. I'm the right person for this. And for that to be enough. And it's not enough because you need some access to money in some way. And some people have that more than others. So you are going around and you're pitching for funding, right? To like different VC firms. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So actually, and even if you take one step back before that, I got into MIT's accelerator, like you said, which was a huge break. We applied to a ton of different accelerators, and MIT's is very special because they don't take IP rights on the company that you build. So that's a huge unlock for the funding that's going to come afterwards. Investors don't generally want to know that your IP is owned by someone else. So very generous of the institution to think about it that way. The capstone of the accelerators that you present the company on the main stage. And MIT's main stage is literally storied. Like every great scientist has presented on that stage. So many American presidents, all this stuff. 2,000 people in the audience. I got a standing ovation. I definitely thought I was on top of the mountain. I raised $0 in Boston. And just to punctuate this, the last line of my pitch was, I'll see you at my table. Like I had
the confidence that we have when we leave. I mean, I'm talking about my undergrad, but I was part of what's called Alcala 100, which is the 100 like most promising students when I graduated. And I was like, I am so smart. And then I couldn't get a job that summer. And I went back to my old job, which was a personal assistant, which meant I was literally scooping up dog poop. And I was like, oh, wow, I used to be somebody.
And that's
anyway, the fall from the delusion of thinking that you're like, I'm going to be amazing. But you made it work though. It ended up happening.
But I think that I heard another Kieran Snyder, who's another really amazing. Textio, exactly. And we don't really know each other. I heard her say this, and it has stuck with me that necessarily when you are standing on top, you must come down. And sometimes you get the privilege of walking down, and sometimes you get pushed off the top.
I love that.
And you fall down. Yeah. But like just having that mental model for me over the years has been so, I guess, comforting, because I think the first couple times you're like, whoa, how am I? Like, how did I go from here to here? You have to go from here to here. It's just going to be a different. So I fell off the mountain very quickly afterwards. I raised $0 in Boston. I didn't know what to do. So, I tried all the firms. I was, trading this MIT card around, like that could get me in the door, and it did. But I started to learn very quickly, like, was it me? Was it the company? Was it the environment? Was it the climate? And so I came back to Seattle with the tail between my legs, and I started to kind of like shop around here. And there was a lot of amazing women who had lunch with me, had a coffee with me, and they kind of like started to help me try to see that like, okay, it's tricky. Yes, I'm a female CEO, but also another problem is like, this is a weird idea that is not particularly understood by a prototypical male investor. And the way this continues to get said to me now, rental is $1 billion industry. I'm sorry, but why would you want to change your clothes? Like if you find something that you like, just keep wearing that.
Which reminds me, we had Fran Dunaway on Tomboy X on the podcast, and she talked about when she was pitching. So Tomboy X is like undergarments, but kind of unisex and not your stereotypical underwear and bra situation. And she would pitch to a lot of these male VCs, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say it's, I don't know, maybe it's blatant sexism, maybe not, but there was just this like, I don't understand it. And they were saying like, well, there's Victoria's Secret. Like, why would you need this? I don't understand the demand. And it sounds like that was kind of your experience, as people just being like, I don't understand it.
And to this male investor's credit, somebody said it to me like very succinctly. He was like, look, the problem is like at this stage, you know, you can do all the discounted cash flow analyses that you want, but there's not a lot here for me to dig into the data. And so I need to understand the problem that you're solving, and I just don't.
Right.
And so then we get into the things that you've heard many times before of like, they're pulling daughters into the room and wives, and we're pulling in admins, and we're trying to like see if we can understand the problem. And that is not, that work is not useless to me. Like, I see that as a signal that you are trying. So I appreciate that. The problem is, and this I feel very strongly about, women are not in the room. And yes, there's like a societal problem with that, and there are barriers that keep us out. But there is also, we ourselves have to be an actor in that situation. And what I mean by that is that there's also very few women relatively on the funding side. And so now I'm telling this story in all sorts of like, you know, like branches, but basically coming back to my fundraising journey, I started to try to think about who actually understands this problem. And I was very fortunate that I had a very small group of people called my customers who not only understood the problem, but also understood the solution. And one of my very early customers said to me, oh, Bika, this is like so great. This is changing my life. You just got to promise me you're going to be here forever because I need you. And I was like, well, I got like $100 in the bank.
Yeah, I'll promise you to give me some money.
And she was like, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? And then it started, I was like, well, I guess you could invest in my business. And we figured it out together. Actually, she could invest in my business. You have to be an accredited investor to be able to make an investment into a small company. So that there is like a barrier, which we can talk about whether.
I didn't know about that. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that or not. But there, you know, we like to keep money things in small groups of
yes,
people.
regulated. So, yes. Mm-hmm.
But if you can hurdle that barrier, there's actually no reason why I can't be an angel investor in your business and in someone else's business. But women have tended not to choose to use their money in that way. By contrast, women are gigantic philanthropists because generally in a heterosexual couple will outlive our partners, and we will be left with a pot of money at the end. And so we, as a group, feel very comfortable giving to philanthropic causes. So it's not that we don't have the cash, nor do we not know how to write checks. Apparently, we know how to do both things.
Yeah.
But we don't seem to be writing them to small companies. And I hope that if people are listening, think about the fact that true consumer innovation is going to come out of these small businesses that are looking at your problems and trying to solve them. And for us to get consumer companies from day 1 to day 8, they're going to need some big sisters in the room.
Well, so my last question on this was going to be, what do you think needs, the article is about how few women are getting funding. What do you think needs to change for women to get more? And do you think it's that more women need to do smaller investing?
So I won't put it all on women, right?
True. Sorry. Yeah, that's a good point.
But agreed. I think that is a huge first step, and we can all do that together. I also think that men in the room have a role in this, and I have so many examples of amazing men who wrote checks to me. One who I think of who has been a 3-time, he's followed on twice. So there are amazing men in the room. And if you are not yet that man, you can be that man.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's a good place to end this conversation to move on to the next one. But I'm doing this fun thing because since you sent me all these outfits, we're going to change outfits for every article that we do because we're taking some videos. So the first outfit that I'm wearing is my go to a brewery outfit. I've got my jeans and shirt and my fringe.
I love.
So we're going to do a quick outfit change for the next topic, which is going to be about the business of subscription boxes. Stay tuned. We're in our new outfits now. I'm in my business attire. If you're watching on video, I'll do a little turn for you after this. This is the outfit that I got a compliment from the parking attendant when I was going to my event for Apple. I was doing some show calling for Apple, actually. It was really fun.
You do look great.
Thank you. Okay, so we're talking about the business of subscription boxes. I did a little research on this because I'm like, this blew up, right? And we were talking about there's like FabFitFun and Birchbox and HelloFresh and Blue Ribbon and Dollar Shave Club, all those kind of things. And I was like, what was the one that like started it? And I Googled it and it was like Milkman in the 1800s. I'm like, okay, not that far back. And then, you've obviously got like Netflix and stuff like that. And what I was trying to search was like the rise and fall of subscription boxes, because again, I feel like it got really, really popular. And every time I searched, there's no fall. Like it definitely rose and it got really popular. And maybe it went down a bit, and you can speak to this more, but it seems to be a growing industry and it's not stopping. So I want to ask you kind of in general, like, why did you want to get into subscription boxes, and what do you think like other companies get wrong in this industry?
It's a great question. And I love that also that you are highlighting the fact that our perception of what is happening from like a boom and bust perspective is so driven by what is punchy in the news. Mm-hmm. And you know this better than me being a journalist, but like one of the things that I've learned sitting in this seat is that the things that the media really wants to cover from a company like mine, funding. Mm-hmm. So if these companies, if some of them have become profitable and they're just kind of like running good businesses, they're not in the news. And so we assume that they aren't doing well, which is like a wild, what we want, I think, or at least what I want for Armoire is for her to be a profitable company that is big and strong. So if that means that we're out of the news, fine.
It's a good thing, right? Yeah. But I think people like having a curated box and they don't have to think about it and they're not overwhelmed by choices. Somebody's choosing for them. I think those are some of the benefits. But I guess, what do you think are kind of pros and cons, or what other companies do wrong, or what?
So the reason I picked this model was twofold. One, the focus on the customer led me to this. So we serve a busy woman. This woman is incredible. She's someone that we all look up to. She's holding up her families, her community, her workplace, and she's doing more than her fair share of work. So we have to be cognizant that her most limited resource is her time. Yeah. And so exactly for the things that you said, we wanted to be able to give her something that she doesn't have to think about on a regular basis. We're here for her when she needs it. And so that subscription model seemed to speak to that from the customer perspective. The other thing that I came to appreciate that I didn't see in the beginning is that it has allowed me to run this company in a way that aligns with my values. The reason that our customer pays us month after month after month, and we're super proud of the fact that of the customers that we started with now 85 months ago, so many of them are still here. Yeah. And the reason that we earn their trust every month is because we're delivering joy to them, and it's a long-term relationship.
Well, talk to me about like I was doing some Googling, and that the 3 to 4 month time frame is really difficult for subscriptions. That's when a lot of people end up dropping off. How do you combat that?
So ours actually doesn't behave exactly like that. Our toughest month is the first month.
Really? Okay.
And we think a lot about that. And I certainly don't think that we have gotten this right yet. A thing that that we're doing, the whole company right now, particularly the leadership team, is that we're taking calls with new customers. And I realized that I had talked almost continuously for about 20 minutes without taking a breath to try to explain to her all the ins and outs of how the thing works. That's a lot.
That's a lot of explaining, yeah.
It's a lot of explaining. Mm-hmm. And so the first month is tough for us. And that's where we see the biggest, we call it churn, which basically means, you choose not to pay us again. And after that, it really flattens out. And so, past 3 or 4 months, we're very likely to keep you.
That's good. Yeah. So part of doing a subscription box is having a lot of inventory and having a lot of organization. We're here in this warehouse, and I remember when I came in here to try on some clothes, and it's not organized by color or short t-shirts here. It almost looks like the Dewey Decimal System over here. I'm like 12.8 is where this shirt is. How has that been? And I know I listened to another podcast of yours saying that like typically in a warehouse, you only want to touch the product once or something like that. And now you touch it like 6 or 7. So logistically, help me understand how this works here.
Yeah, so I am as much of a marveler at this warehouse as everyone else, because I think an incredible thing that has pushed us forward is that the innovation that we're building here is homegrown between the tech team and the ops team. And so between the ops team and the tech team, we've built first of its kind tech to put first barcodes and now RFID tags on all of the clothing, which allows us to move the clothes around in a much more rapid way. And particularly to your point about the Dewey Decimal System, when you walk through the warehouse, it is not organized by anything that visually would give you a signal. It's actually on purpose. We don't try to put things that are visually similar next to each other because the locations are dynamic. And so every time an item comes back onto the rack, it gets a new location that its RFID understands. And when we go to pack it, it loses that location. So it's very important that we...
My operations brain is going crazy. I'm like, I want to sit down and look at all these spreadsheets.
It's really cool. And I mean, the fact that we invented this, that's what I mean, that like I marveled at this in the same way that everyone else does. I'm like, how did we come up with this?
Anything else you want to say about the subscription box industry as a whole and anything from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, like one of the sort of negative things that happens when we have consolidation of news and funding is that things become trendy when it is disconnected from the customer. So I think a subscription box for the right customer in the right use case is incredibly valuable. It is not something that should be applied to everything. And so I think for Armoire, busy woman, looking for regularity because we know she wants to change her clothes. Those are the things that a subscription box gives you, a long-term relationship and a cadence.
Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't need a subscription, Microsoft Word, because I haven't bought it. Sorry, I have been holding this in. I bought it in 2004, paid for one CD, and I transferred it to my computer in 2014. I just got a new computer and I have to have a subscription to Word. What do you mean? I just need Word anyway. I think that's stupid, and they're just trying to make money, and I don't need more AI on my Word. Okay, it's time for a new article and a new outfit. Please hold. Yes, we'll be right back. Okay, we are in our new outfits. I'm going for cool hip-hop dance girl, and we're talking about shipping. So a Seattle shipping company closed. Bellevue-based Pandion has closed. It was founded in 2020 and they announced publicly in 2021. They were aimed at helping shippers with their what's called final mile delivery through a network of more than 1 million drivers. They had this runway of funding that they were going to end in 2024. They thought some investors would come on board, but at the end of the day, they didn't, and so they had to shut down. What I thought was a little interesting in this is that they raised $30 million in 2021, and then in March of 2024, so last year, they raised another $45 million. And somehow they still couldn't make it through to, like, how did they lose all that money so quickly? It does sound like they were in debt. And so some of that $45 million was probably paying back some of that debt because all the employees were let go with no severance. And they said, we owe more than we have in the bank. I do think that, I was talking to my journalist friend about this and that, of course, there's a lot more shipping during the pandemic. Everybody was ordering. And so they were scaling up their business, but it seems like they couldn't scale down their business. And he was saying that, drivers kind of have more power right now because there's like Pandion probably didn't have enough business for these drivers. And so they're like, okay, well, I'm going to go where the business is. And, Pandion would then have to pay them more and they probably didn't have funding for that. So it's interesting what's happening with there. I also think back to Convoy. You're familiar with Convoy? Mm-hmm. They were sort of trying to help with like semi trucks. If they're going to deliver something at Colorado, it was this tech company that would allow them to then drive back with some other shipments that are being emptied. They ended up shutting down. So I feel like the shipping industry is just something like companies are kind of struggling to figure out. And obviously there's a ton of shipping in your company. So how did you choose your shipping partner? What are your thoughts on this article and kind of the shipping industry in general?
Shipping is tough. And I think an interesting kind of thing that informs maybe a lot of our American thinking. When I was in business school, the Postmaster General came to speak, and he opened his talk with talking about how it is a deeply American idea, this access to information. And at the time when the Postal Service was established and we decided that every American had the right to information, mail was the main way that we did that because we didn't have the internet. And so we decided that it behooved us as a society to pay for that. All of us were willing to chip in and that we were going to get those pieces of information to the most remote places of our country, which I felt incredibly inspired by that. Just sort of like as my, what I believe in of what America should be. It's been very interesting to take that kind of like idealistic belief and sit on the other side of the table when now we are paying the shipping companies, including the USPS, and trying to derive a service from it.
Well, I should ask that. Do you use UPS, USPS, FedEx? Like, is there one partner that you have?
We use them all.
Really? Okay.
In all sorts of different ways. And a thing that might not be apparent to the average consumer is that average consumer probably uses them all because actually your package has been touched in many different ways by the time it gets to you. And to your point about the last mile, generally the USPS is doing the last mile even for FedEx.
Oh.
And so when we think about who is paying for that last mile and then who is getting paid for that last mile, it doesn't exactly line up. So it's a really interesting kind of like conundrum. Amazon is a big player in last mile and is very often doing their own last mile and will likely, I think you heard it here first, start to offer that service. That has been their pattern. They build something that works for them internally and then they offer it as a service externally. So
all those like Amazon vans that you see delivering to you, you think that they're going to start offering it to other companies at a price. Yeah.
Right. And they are already doing this to some extent where you can warehouse with Amazon. And if you warehouse with Amazon, they will do your last mile delivery for you. I mean, you pay them for the privilege, but right now they're not contracting with someone like us who can't warehouse with them because, you know, we have all this craziness that happens. But shipping is tough. And another kind of like maybe anecdote to sort of like fill out the picture. We have tried to do our last mile on our own and it's tricky. And it's kind of like when you start to think about like how it actually plays itself out. We had a woman in a car, bunch of packages. She's got a route and she's got an amount of time that we think it's going to take her. And so we've kind of like figured out the calculation to make sure that we can actually afford this. Her parking spot is blocked. She can't get into the building. Somebody has a mean dog and she can't drop the package off. The number of exceptions that are going to happen on her route that day are so high that it was really hard even in our densest markets to make it work. And so we are really grateful to our last mile partner in Seattle, Move In, plug for them.
It's a Seattle company?
Seattle
okay, cool.
company,
Yeah.
BIPOC owned, and they are making something work that we could not. We personally know some of their drivers now. These people are heroes.
Yeah.
They are figuring out a way to get past the dog and around the Amazon truck and to park the car and run up. But it really is like it's a formidable task to try to balance. Consumers don't want to pay for shipping.
Is it more expensive than you thought it would be?
It's way more expensive. Yeah. And I think that's part of the problem. To your point about like the drivers want to get paid more. Yeah, they want to get paid more because they're not getting paid much. But the problem is that at the sort of like at our level or, you know, our margin's very slim
it's too. Are you profit? Is it a pass-through cost? Like if I'm paying whatever, $10 in shipping, is that a pass-through? There's got to be some margin on that for you because you're dealing, you know, you should be taking, I don't know if you can answer that, but.
I mean, so yes. And so we offer free shipping, but of course, like the price is built into that, but we aren't taking like margin in that way because we're kind of like looking at the box as overall and hoping that we can negotiate with our shippers enough that the overall margin of the box is profitable. But I would say like unfortunate aha for me is that I expected that shipping would come down to like single dollars. That is not true.
Really?
Except in very particular cases where we've got a bunch of density and we have a particular relationship. But back to your kind of like your central question of like, how come we can't do last mile more efficiency? It's about density. You want to make sure that route, you know, that we had the woman driving, she's not got 20 minutes of dead time. So convoys, backhaul, concept, you want to make sure that you've got. And so that's why it lends itself to big players and very hard for somebody to break in because you need that kind of density of volume to be able to make the math work.
All right, we're going to do our last article and our last outfit.
Amazing.
We're back in our new outfits. Okay, where to begin? Return to office. I'm sorry, I'm getting more unhinged as the time goes on. We're just drinking wine and changing outfits.
Have given Rachel a margarita. Yeah. Also, actually, your margarita was produced by a woman-owned business.
Oh my God. Drink
Armoire
every time something is woman-owned in Armoire. I love it.
Yeah, they are great. So local too.
Awesome. Okay. Okay, so this last article is just about, obviously a lot of companies are having this return to office. Amazon's 5 days a week now. We all know that. And it was kind of talking about, should companies be rethinking their dress code? 54% said that they have business casual, and 43% said that they have casual dress code. About half of the hiring managers they polled said that dress code guidelines were important. 50% of hiring managers said that dress code guidelines were important, and now it's down to 31%. So they're saying like dress code doesn't matter quite as much anymore. But you do want to consider things like culture and treating it like a benefit, and also employee retention. I know for sure it's something that's top of mind for me. You also want to think about if dress code only applies to certain job titles. So maybe if salespeople are, required to wear a certain outfit, but admins don't have to, or something like that. And the last stat on this is that 75% of the people they polled believe that workplace should become less formal. My personal opinion on this is yes, I personally would like to have a less formal workplace. I still think you should look good. You're not wearing sweatpants, but I don't know, in terms of cost, as you can kind of speak to that. But, you're getting ready, you're going downtown, whatever you're doing. Personally, I just want to be a little more casual. So how do you think people should be thinking about dress codes? And how do you think companies should be thinking about dress codes?
So I would start in a faraway place. Why do we dress up? What is the point of this? And one of the things I think about is all of the old cultures have an idea of armor and makeup, and the warrior would suit up before they went out into the world. And it was an important ritual in terms of putting that power back into yourself, reminding yourself of what you were doing. So I think there is a lot of value, and it's mostly about you and yourself. If we encourage the warrior to dress in that way that makes them feel like themselves, their most powerful version of themselves, I think as employers, we get the most out of our employees. And so I think it's really about like keeping the edges very soft, but reminding people why we do this. We want you to feel your best.
I do it for the compliments.
That is not something to just like brush aside. It is also amazing, right? To feel and the fact that you have that from your community and sometimes even strangers, like that's also amazing. Like we should do more of that to each other.
Is this return to office? I imagine the answer is yes, but how is this return to office affecting your business and your customers? Was it pretty immediate when Amazon announced that, or has it been kind of gradual, the increase? Because I'm guessing it's an increase in your customership.
It's definitely been good for us. Particularly we have strong presence in a lot of Amazon's like big markets. So Seattle is a really big market for us. DC is a really big market for us. And so
they dress up over there.
They do dress up over there. And as we've seen them go back to work, it's been good for our business. But perhaps like a surprising thing about our business is you could probably imagine every day in March of 2020, I woke up thinking that the entire business was likely to die today, that I would lose every single one of the thousands of customers that I had. By some miracle, that did not happen. And with a little bit of distance, I realized that it probably was not just a miracle. People were sending us pictures all the way through those COVID years of themselves suited up.
Yeah.
And one of the stories I think of is actually not one of our customers, but a husband of one of our customers was commenting that he started wearing his shoes in the house.
Oh, I do that.
Because
sometimes I cannot get motivated to work and I have to put my shoes on to be like, you are at a job. You're not going to your couch.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
like a similar mentality. And she was dressing up on Saturdays. She might have been pouring that glass of wine by herself, but it was Saturday. It was a different day than Friday. And she was, so I think that kind of idea of dressing for yourself, accessing your power has been a part of the Armoire story. And I'm so thrilled that we get to be a part of that equation for people.
Yeah. What if you did a corporate membership? You know how you can do like a corporate membership at a WeWork, but they do it with Armoire. Like, okay, if you want all your people to look good, then, right? Do you do that?
I want to sell that thing.
You've already thought about that?
I mean, I haven't sold it to anyone.
Okay, everybody. If you're listening, if you want your people to look nice, buy this package that we've made up.
And we have a lot of good evidence about the fact that it would definitely makes people feel better. So employer, if you want to offer a
especially people that like are speaking all the time at events and stuff. Yeah. Okay. I love it. After this, we're going to have a business meeting.
And Rachel, one thing that we talked about was the fact that like it makes your employees feel less stressed because
for sure.
When you had your 5 items in your closet, you just picked one. You weren't sort of like agonizing about what to wear next. So employers will also get more mind space back from their employees.
Yeah. Really quick. Part of why this was important to me is because I do a lot of stage work and I wasn't investing in my clothes. And at one point I was introducing the mayor of Seattle for an event. So I'm on stage introducing the mayor and I have a hole in my blazer that like you can't really see. And there's like a safety pin, but like I know it's there. And I was just like, this is so stupid that I'm like, you know, like pretending to be an adult. And so I'm like, just invest in this. Anyway, that's why I think this is really important. All right. Our last thing before we wrap up is what advice do you have for our listeners? This can be personal, professional, style advice. What do you have for us?
The advice I am trying to take for myself this year is the things I'm saying to myself. Would you say that to a friend who you love?
Yeah.
You might say the sentiment of it, but you would say it in a different way. You would say, yeah, girl, you're going to be great. No, this world is not burning down. And if it is, we're going to create our own little personal kind of like perfect place on its own. But the kindness that we extend to each other, extend it to yourself.
Very well said and a great place to end. So thank you for hosting. And shout out to Nick Patry, who's here. He's helping us with our audio and we're experimenting with some video. So shout out to him and thank you for listening. Remember to rate and subscribe. And again, thank you, Ambika, for being here.
Thank you, Rachel. It was a blast.
This has been The Weekly with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.